cryptocurrency in real estate, and the hottest topic of the crypto space, NFTs. And today we're having amazing guests, Vlad Ginsburg, who has been working on NFTs for years. It's not news to him. He's an entrepreneur, a crypto enthusiast, and we'll have so many questions for you, Vlad. Thank you for joining.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you so much, Natalia. Just for everyone listening, Proppy and Natalia were one of my first true, contacts and friendships in the crypto world. And so, the long, strange trip it's been since 2017 to have been that alongside you, Natalia, and seeing the amazing things that you've accomplished with Proppy is really inspirational. So having the opportunity to now join you in a webinar is, it's really exciting for me. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Vlad. I appreciate your kind words. We also have my co-host, William Dickey, today. Hi, Willie.
Hey, Natalia. Hey, everyone. How you doing?
Good, thank you. And Rick Teed, real estate realtor agent in San Francisco, did a number of transactions in cryptocurrency, serving best of the best in the crypto world, probably all the crypto folks that are buying real estate, including Michael Arrington. He's been doing transactions for them, helping them to serve as sellers, as buyers in the Bay Area, and I think internationally. And Rick was one of the first agents to do a blockchain transaction with Proppy some years ago in San Francisco. Thank you, Rick, for joining.
Pleasure. Happy to be here.
Awesome. So NFTs. And first of all, thank you everyone for joining the call today on Zoom, as well as listeners on Facebook and Twitter. If you have any questions, put them here in the chat or on Facebook, and Proppy team will make sure to ask questions here to our outstanding guests. So NFTs. NFTs have been all the rage for the past months, if not years, particularly when Mark Cuban, Gary Vee, and Elon Musk became super fans in recent months. NFTs, or non-fungible tokens, are cryptographic tokens existing on the blockchain that represent something unique, like a piece of art, music, a collectible, a baseball trading card. And today we'll talk about real estate, whether it's feasible to get real estate asset on the NFT space. We had a wonderful discussion on Clubhouse last Friday, which we'll try to do this Friday evening as well. So stay tuned, follow Proppy on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to understand when will be our next deep talk on NFTs. But basically on that call, we kind of came to the conclusion, and Rick, you were there, that there are three applications on NFTs related to real estate: virtual real estate, real ownership stored on NFT, and a little bit of like secret today, Proppy is working on that. And then finally, the third one, crowdfunding. It's different from STO, so like really different thing comparing to NFT. So before we get to real estate and NFTs, I'd like to ask our guests what they think really drove this interest to NFT at first place in the recent month. And Vlad, how about you? Tell us a little bit more about background.
Thanks so much, Natalia. And yes, when you and I met, you were preparing the early days of Proppy, and I was preparing the early days of Blockparty. And that was a time that I was thinking about NFTs as event tickets, because, to use some cryptocurrency jargon, an NFT, the non-fungible token, was kind of began as the ERC 721 standard on Ethereum, in which every token is a fully unique asset on Ethereum. That's different than ERC20, which most people have heard of, which is the tokens that, there's a million tokens, and every one is totally fungible with each other. Well, for a music fan like myself, it was, ERC 20 sounds like a GA ticket, and ERC 721 sounds like a seated ticket where the metadata matters of where you have to sit. So that's really where our head was at. And it wasn't until I really started thinking about, well, this metadata can it took a while. I'm not, it took a while to look at the others working in NFTs at the time, with Dapper working on CryptoKitties and other folks trying different kinds of art, where you realize that, well, really so much of what we transact in our everyday life, other than commodities, I suppose, are inherently non-fungible. So if you use an NFT as an idea to capture whatever non-fungible commerce you're talking about, then, you can tokenize anything, almost anything. And that kind of got my company to where it is now, about tokenizing music and sports and art and all of these things that I would say are cultural assets. But on the subject of real estate, I think way back to 2017, when I, for the first time, was exposed to a real estate title on a blockchain by Proppy, right? How is that really different than what we're seeing now of selling a piece of art, a piece of digital art on blockchain? Something that I speak about quite often, because it speaks to my experience prior to blockchain in the fine art world, is that we in the fine art world don't really have certificates of authenticity, not anymore. In somewhere around 2010, all the major foundations, Warhol, Haring, Basquiat, etc., stopped giving certificates of authenticity because they couldn't tell what was real anymore. The fakes were too good. So we moved to a certificate of title system. And that started to really look and feel a lot like the real estate business, where you get a certificate of title. And when you go and sell your artwork, no one can say, is this the one true artwork? But with a certificate of title, you can say that you are the owner of this artwork. And based on where you got it from, the previous certificate of title, then we can chase it back and everything seems legitimate. So again, when I saw that first Proppy certificate of title that was registered in Ethereum, I don't care what token standard you're using, that's a non-fungible token, right? Because of all, because you're conferring ownership of this real asset in a digital way. And so, that's very exciting for people in the non-fungible token space. And I just want to address quickly that, yeah, I mean, I was joking on Twitter with you, but I actually meant it. It was one of those serious jokes that Proppy's an OG in NFTs, because you guys were doing certificates of title on blockchain 3 years ago. And for everybody that was working in NFTs 3 years ago, we all kind of have the same aha moment, where we start with whatever it is that we're working on, whatever corner of ownership we're working on, and then have that moment of like, oh my gosh, this applies to everything. And so as much as Mark Cuban and Gary Vee and all those types of people are having their giddy moment of discovering NFTs, just wait until they have their holy F, this applies to like everything that we do in commerce moment. And that's where it's going to start, really taking off.
Rick?
You are muted, I think.
Yeah, Rick, anything to add? Thank you, Vlad.
I mean, anything you can digitize, you can fractionalize. And let's just keep it really simple. Vlad, what you just said, fantastic. But if I'm listening for the first time, I'd be like, I don't know what he's talking about. But I think that you go from the aha moment to the holy F moment in a big hurry. Because let's just look at like what happened 25, 30 years ago. And maybe it probably goes back further. In real estate, you had timeshares, right? And I mean, timeshares then turned into what today is Airbnb and VRBO. It's just a much better version. It's a version that I would use. I wouldn't buy a timeshare. I have a little bit more experience in real estate, and I would never pay those egregious fees. And basically what you're doing is you're selling a property 2.5 to 3 times for the same asset by buying into a into a timeshare. So better mousetraps come along. If you take NFTs, and I'm telling you this is going to happen, it doesn't matter. Any house, I wouldn't call it really a liquid asset. But there are a lot of people that would like to say, hey, I own that house, even though I don't live there, but I'm sharing in the upside. These are the key parts. You're wondering how adoption is going to happen in the mainstream? Well, look at the Kings of Leon. How did that fan club all of a sudden start buying the rights to a digital album and also concert tickets and backstage passes and the ability to meet the band? Well, it became a problem because their fan base didn't know anything about NFTs, didn't even understand how to buy Ethereum or Bitcoin. And it was a Saturday or a Sunday when the whole thing was going down. And luckily, somebody in the band knew Bill at Abra and called him. Bill was spent the whole night on Saturday and Sunday night providing Ethereum so these guys could actually bid on the prize that they wanted. So you can imagine that causes like this sort of ground up. But let's look at real estate. If you can fractionalize it and digitize it, I don't actually have to own or live in the house, but as long as I'm betting on the upside of that property and somebody wants a loan, this is what's going to drive it. And what's going to drive it even more importantly and quicker and faster is holders of Bitcoin and Ethereum are never going to sell because of the taxation. But you can borrow against it, and that's coming.
Yeah, that's a huge topic, borrowing.
Right. And so when you start to borrow, and I might say, okay, well, great. I could borrow this property. I borrow to buy this property, but I might do it with 10 people. And on that title, wouldn't you call that? It's one property. It's, yeah, sure, you could duplicate it if you actually could like duplicate that exact lot in that same location. You might put it in the front of it, the back of it, the side of it. But in reality, you can't really duplicate that exact asset. So it is a non-fungible asset, and you can fractionalize it. This is going to unlock liquidity in assets, whether you have a Picasso hanging on the wall that has a digital tag on it, which means it's the only one. And I don't have to have it in my living room, but I could say, I own a Picasso, right? I'm betting on the upside. What about collector cars? I mean, if I own a bunch of cars in a barn and I need, a few $1,000,000 bucks, I don't want to sell any of my cars, but I might sell some of the upside. And that's why I say, we have to look at really the big picture here about what's going to happen. That's why I love Proppy, because Proppy, the way I look at it, your positioning is, I know you've been through a lot, Natalia. I know you've gutted it out. I know you've gone this battle and you've believed. And there are moments where I looked at Proppy as like, I just wish I could help. I can't really seem to get real estate agents to understand the importance of posting things, titles on a blockchain, because it will dramatically eliminate the need for A, title insurance, and B, lawyers, because all the information is there for everyone to see. And you know exactly when it happened. It's time-stamped. I think it demystifies a lot of things. Maybe it's not perfect, maybe it's not everything, but you've stuck it out. You've done incredible things. You're about to get rewarded with the entire world needing title to everything and to have digital tags. It doesn't matter whether it's property or whether it's someone's bike. It doesn't matter. Maybe it is something that, like, maybe it's a club, it's a country club, but it's an NFT sold, and everybody who has it has access to that club. Everything's going that way. They're not going to use dollars and get memberships. It's going to be totally done through this. That's the way I see this entire space going. Vlad, do you agree with me?
I do. I think that, I'm in the NFT space, so I'm championing digital title all over the place. So naturally, I do agree, and I think that we have a long way to go. You bring up the Kings of Leon example, and that's kind of stepping into like my world of like intersection of music and art. And you're exactly right. The fans were like, "Hey, I've heard of this thing, but what the F is it? And how is this thing even possible to be? How is this different than? Aren't you also releasing this on Spotify? So what exactly am I getting? What help?" And I think that the industry has to do a better job of helping to understand like what digital title really means. I think that, and this is actually a question for Natalia, and I'm curious to hear your experience in Proppy, but selling upside and things and fractionalizing does trigger securities laws. And so and oftentimes when you're talking about fractionalizing, be it a Picasso or be it real estate or be it whatever, just by virtue of using a token to do it and selling upside, you're triggering all sorts of securities laws. So Natalia, can you share with me and for the audience about Proppy and where you guys have run into securities and how you've solved for that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the question, Vlad. So first of all, regarding the NFT space, we're looking at putting every title document on the NFT. And then when you transfer ownership from one wallet or from one person to another, then it does not concern the security laws. But if we do fractional ownership and someone issues security tokens, and obviously they should be registered with SEC. But I'm talking, we've been having this conversation with few folks, with real estate lawyers, that there is an opportunity for NFT to be involved in fractional ownership without triggering the SEC laws. But it's still just a conversation. So there is no proof of concept developed just yet. We clearly believe that there is a possibility for the entire asset to be transferred from one owner to another as an NFT. We kind of see the light in the tunnel. And basically, Vlad, as you mentioned, we've been doing that. Every single transaction on Proppy has been recorded on the blockchain. It's immutable. We've been issuing blockchain certificate of ownership, but it was done by smart contracts. Every smart contract is unlocked with traditional tokens, ERC20 Proppy tokens. Now we're talking like, why not to put this blockchain certificate into the NFT, the ERC721 token, and it's just a matter of, I think, weeks to actually launch that. So stay tuned. We're planning on the white paper part 2 edition. That would be huge for the community, both real estate and crypto space. But I want to get a little bit back. Willie, I know that you got into the crypto space a little bit later than the folks that are here on the call. What was the most confusing thing about NFTs for you? What would be the first question for you to ask these guys? Because we have guests that are Asians and they don't know much about cryptocurrency yet. So what would be your first question?
So when I started digging into the whole NFT thing, I guess in terms of ownership representation, so, I come from a finance background, and whether you're securitizing a loan or you have a REIT, and then there's ownership in the form of, whether it's publicly traded and you have stock or something like that, that represents a fractional ownership of a company or an asset. So the thing I struggled with the most was trying to figure out, how does that differentiate from an NFT, and why is it better? Or maybe they have no similarity at all, and I'm still learning.
They're still quite distinct. I think the best way, the NFT derives value from whatever the things are that make it unique. And so because every single token on a blockchain must be different than any other token on the blockchain, then it has no value. The only value are the things that it represents. And so, as Natalia correctly pointed out, you can sell the ownership of a whole house as an NFT, or a whole property as a single NFT. That's kind of where the technology stands at the moment. Not to throw a whole wrench in the conversation, using more jargon, but there's another NFT standard. There's another type of NFT that's only just starting to get a little bit of press, but it's a little bit closer to what would be a REIT, and would be a little bit closer to an NFT acting as or facilitating rather fractionalized ownership, and that's a whole other standard called ERC 1155. And that's when there is, Natalia mentioned smart contracts. That is when the smart contract that governs the NFT can be subdivided into an infinite number of subcontracts. If that sounds confusing, imagine an NFT as a vending machine.
Partition. It's just partitioning off.
Yeah, I like the vending machine metaphor, where you have a vending machine that's the master contract, and then within the vending machine, you have lots and lots and lots of little tiny versions of the vending machine. And so you can actually, and I think this is probably the more that this type of NFT gets popularized, the more I think real estate folks will start to will start to get excited, because I think that is a very simple and elegant, from a technology standpoint, way to differentiate an NFT that is a certificate of title or digital title for one property, or perhaps one building with units inside of it being partitioned off as NFT.
Vlad, can you maybe give an example, or Rick, about just going back to the basics again, about an artwork that was sold by, or music piece that was sold for a lot of money, and there is royalty involved, the commission being paid automatically?
Sure. NFTs. So, as you said earlier, what makes a blockchain special? Right? It's an immutable ledger of transactions. It's an internet of transactions, where a global network of servers all witness each transaction. And so the history of transactions can't be altered in any way. And so now that you have this internet, let's say, of transactions, all represented by tokens, so you see the ledger of where every token has been. With NFTs, since every tokens are totally unique, so you can now see an internet of transactions of the provenance and chain of title of these NFTs. The other great thing about blockchain is we have smart contracts. For a real estate crowd, that's just a fancy way of saying an automated escrow system. And so if an NFT must be governed by a smart contract that basically tells it what to do, and basically tells it how to behave, and basically governs the behavior of that token. So we can program smart contracts to act in such a way that every time a token transacts on the blockchain, that a portion of the price of the transaction be returned to the originator, or some specified wallet address. So in the example of art, and you're seeing this now happen with NFTs with lots of digital artists, every single time an NFT is bought and resold and bought, a percentage of every resale is automatically, by this automatic escrow, being routed back to the original artist's wallet. And I think that's where it gets really really exciting for artists, because by the time they've gotten big enough to be sold and resold many times over, they've also probably been had some negative experiences with somebody who's supposed to pay them. And in the case of an automatic escrow system, well, it's right in the words automatic and escrow. And this is probably why some real estate attorneys that should be a little bit worried about this stuff, is because it does the job for them. It takes a slice of the transaction fee and routes it to wherever it needs to go.
Thank you, Vlad. Rick, any examples in art or music that really provoked your interest in the last months or weeks?
There's just so many auctions that have been happening, and I just think you just gotta go on a browser and search and just see all the different transactions that have happened. But I just what I always try to do is look at what's the use case, why does it matter? And what Vlad is saying, if you think about it, let's say everything eventually will evolve into, they'll figure it out. We're going to figure out exactly how to make these NFTs work on a digital and fractionalized basis so that it really applies simply to homes. But just to take Vlad's last example, let's say you have a house and there are tokens exchange to sell the property to multiple people at one time with no ability to gain from the upside of the property at all. And therefore, the tokens are kind of held tightly. But as the value of the tokens go up, because they kind of like move along with the value of the real estate, you could actually take some of the tokens and then buy a separate piece of property. And by doing this, you still have the original crew or group, or a person can trade in and out of the tokens as a use or the rights to the property. Has nothing to do with gaining the value, but their value gained would be to have more than one house eventually. And there'll be early use cases. Look at, lawyers are great at figuring this stuff out. Governments are great at making things difficult. And they do this on the purpose in the beginning because their fear of change is too quick. How are we ever going to be able to follow this? Let's just throw in this rule or that rule and we'll prevent people from doing things. And then that'll slow the whole train down so we can get up to speed. That's the way I look at the whole thing. But it is coming, and it's coming fast. Just like there's no way ETFs are ever going to happen, and they're happening. Look, if you think that MicroStrategy is not an ETF, I don't know what is. I mean, now you got like...
Tell about MicroStrategy for those who are not aware.
Oh, so MicroStrategy is a publicly traded company. It's a SaaS product, essentially. They've been around for a long time. That stock has been bouncing around at, call it $145 a share for the past 5 years, somewhere in and around there. They decided they would take their treasury, which is Michael Saylor, who's the CEO, who's also an MIT rocket scientist, has historically had so much fun out on his yacht. I don't know that he ever goes to work. He probably sits on his yacht all day long and works from there. And but anyway, character, smart guy, obviously. And he decided that when Bitcoin was around $11,200, he initially bought about $435 million worth of Bitcoin. And he got a board approval to do so. And I think he's now, from multiple moments of pleadings with the board, let's do another raise, sell some MicroStrategy shares. He's up to over $2 billion worth of Bitcoin as a treasury. Why does it matter? Because his stock might perform in the manner which they can really kind of like project with their quarterly estimates. And the stock has historically stayed in and around the same place for so long. And, you know, it's a decent company, great stock, I guess, you know, whatever. I mean, you don't really hear about it. You hear about the FANG stocks. I call them Mount FANG because I added Microsoft and Tesla to it. So I call it Mount FANG, which is Microsoft, Tesla, Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Google. So you've got all these companies that potentially, like Tesla now, buying $1.5 billion worth of Bitcoin to hold in its treasury. Well, Michael Saylor started this whole thing. And he started calling out Elon Musk and others. And then he started having Clubhouse calls and Zoom calls with offering his playbook. And he had 25,000 CEOs of small and medium-sized businesses just a month ago. And he was explaining his playbook on why to buy Bitcoin as a treasury. And if you look at it, he started buying at 11,200, then he bought a big chunk more at 18,000. He's still like in the money, like 3x based on his second move. I don't know what the third and fourth buys were, but probably all in, he's probably at an average of low 20s is my guess. And he has over $2 billion in Bitcoin. So that sits in his bank account, corporate bank account, and it goes on the books as, oh, look, the corporate treasury is swelling. They have to report these earnings. The stock has gone up to $600. So it's quadrupled. So not only has their balance sheet swelled, but their stock has exploded. And now he's taught Wall Street. This is what I'm saying, because look, somebody figured out how to get an ETF out there without having to have an ETF. So what is, I think it was JP Morgan or Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan the other day, Jamie Dimon's company, his clever bankers put together a basket of companies like MicroStrategy, which has NVIDIA in there. It has Riot Blockchain. It has PayPal. It has Square. and of course MicroStrategy, and they're calling this their basket of companies to give you crypto exposure, which I think is hilarious. Like, I mean, I sat back and I wrote about this and I said, you know, there's only one company here that I would even buy. The rest of them, I don't want to rent the upside of Bitcoin, and I don't want to rent the upside of Bitcoin through Square or PayPal.
You just want to buy Bitcoin
or Grayscale for that matter. And so you better buy and hold. And so again, it comes down to, do you own tokens or do you rent them? And I just think it's really interesting what's happening. But you see, the thing is, that example of MicroStrategy, companies have, so many groups have been trying to get ETFs, which are exchange traded funds, so they can really give broad markets exposure to Bitcoin without going through like Grayscale Bitcoin Trust. So what's really happening is they find a way around the SEC, and Microsoft did it brilliantly. So just like that, the NFT space, fractionalizing, because you can digitize, you can fractionalize, they're going to find a way around this, Vlad, and I'm positive it's coming, and there will be ways that'll happen first. And it might be just like, okay, so the value of the real estate goes up. Whoever started this NFT is clever, very smart real estate person. The value of the real estate goes up and they can just go ahead and refi it. You've got tokens which have supported the value of the asset. Just go and buy another one. And you'll see, this is a way that I believe that those types of clubs, like people who want to have like a club where they want 10 houses or 15 houses and they want them in different regions or locations, it's an incredible way to do it. So yeah. There will be workarounds. And I think the NFT space, everything, whether anything that, like, if you look at what happened with Uber, initially, all that was, hey, there's limos waiting on the side of the highway, waiting for the planes to come in with their clients. They're just sitting there for hours waiting, and they're idle. And so to get more dollars out of those cars, they started to network them so that they could be driving people and without getting too far away from, say, the airport, so they could still pick their client up, or say they drop their clients off at a big ball and they go out and run the limo around for 2 hours to make sure they're back on time. It's just using an idle asset. And I think idle assets sit everywhere in front of us every day.
Yeah.
Just like our cars at night. So the NFT space is so big.
We have a question from YouTube channel, and I would like also to ask this question to Vlad. How would an NFT help physical world assets such as cars, aircraft, or boats? And of course, we include real estate here. As far as I know, physical objects were not tied to NFTs as of now, but Vlad, do you know anything that has been done already in the space? You're muted.
Yes, that dance. Yeah, it's something that we experiment with quite often. In the world of collectibles, it is a little bit easier than a boat or an aircraft, just because collectibles tend to be things that you can sort of hold or put under your arm a little bit.
So you kind of need a vault or something. So the owner of NFT would redeem the access to this collectible.
Well, sort of. I guess what if you think about an NFT as a digital certificate of title, it could be a digital certificate of authenticity for artwork. But the challenge, and trust me, every ICO that had an idea about fractionalizing or otherwise tokenizing art has come across my desk. And the problem is always tying the physical object to the digital object.
Yeah.
And there is I've seen some cool solutions out there. For example, the same kind of technology on your iPhone that recognizes your face and unlocks your phone has the same kind of technology for objects. And so, and takes the image recognition and creates code into it. And so I've seen companies that are doing exactly that are capturing an image and hashing that code directly into the smart contract. So now imagine you take, and I've seen these guys in action, like they're taking 100 identical baseball cards and telling them apart individually. And so the way I would see it working like that, so, let's say it's a baseball card for this example. I might have the baseball card, or better yet, let's say it's AirPods. Let's say these are super collectible AirPods. And these collectible AirPods have an NFT that represents its digital certificate of title to the physical object. So I would take a photo of the AirPods, and that would write to the smart contract that these AirPods are tied to that NFT. And so now when I sell these AirPods on some secondary market, or somebody brokers the sale of my AirPods to somebody else, we're actually transacting in the moment the NFT, the digital title. But the smart contract only closes the loop, and escrow is paid out once the physical AirPods are fulfilled to me, and the new buyer takes the photo. It gets matched to the smart contract, and it unlocks the transaction. So that's actually one of the really exciting technologies I'm seeing in the space. I'm certainly not sure if that would apply to an aircraft or a boat. I think it's kind of hard to capture that in a photograph. But look, we already have so much metadata on aircraft. We already have so much metadata on cars and boats. There's serial numbers. Every piece of information on the registration of my car is really just metadata. And so the NFTs on Blockparty, I think we have 1,000 character limit on metadata that's hashed directly into the NFT. So putting in serial numbers, title numbers, make, model, year, square footage, whatever, all of that is just expressed as metadata on a blockchain, and is thus able to be captured by NFT. So I do think, I've said a lot, but to put a fine point on it, how would NFTs help physical world assets? Again, paper documents of certificates of title and ownership are going extinct. When we talk about the internet of transactions that blockchains are, it is a safe, secure, and immutable way to store a global list of transactions. And so why wouldn't the certificates of title and ownership live on that blockchain? I do see a future. I think I saw somebody else ask, will home deeds ever become NFTs? Well, that's exactly what we're talking about. Home deeds can be represented as tokens on a blockchain.
Yeah, and there is a first version of that. If you do a transaction on property, you'll have a blockchain certificate of title in the end of the transaction, every single transaction on property. So it is like NFT. And again, it's a matter of weeks when we actually will start producing NFT 721, ERC 721.
So that's actually what I'm saying, Natalia. I have a property certificate of ownership in my files. And so, it's for us blockchain folks to start nitpicking what token standard is this on which blockchain. That's a tech conversation. The fact that I have a certificate of information on the blockchain that is unique to that property and to me or whomever as an owner, that is a non-fungible piece of information on the blockchain, which is why, again, I joke when I say you guys are NFT OGs, but practically speaking, I have a non-fungible asset from Proppy from 2017. You guys, and so you guys are truly early in that space.
Thank you. And it's awesome to be in that space and see agents being so interested to really get this into practice. So practically it works. You just close a transaction within the system, you receive the blockchain certificate. And the beauty of this innovation is that in the majority of states in the United States, there are blockchain laws that state that if you have this blockchain certificate and record of the transaction, you can actually claim ownership. So if something happens with the county, this is your evidence. This is the buyer's evidence that transaction has happened. It's immutable and you can prove it in the court. again, if for now it's a parallel proof of system to the counter recording offices, but with this excitement in the space, it may turn into the primary source of evidence of ownership. Rick, do you think it's feasible?
My brain just went on a little journey about something that Vlad said, and I just want to, Vlad, can I ask, because like really, look, I'm seeing things like this, like, there was a building built downtown San Francisco. Now, nobody really wants to be long, big commercial buildings downtown San Francisco. But let's say prior to COVID, you got to get developers, you sell the naming rights to the building, and Salesforce bought that tall building. But I see like developers saying, hey, I've got this land, and they put an NFT on it, and anybody can buy the tokens. And really the tokens in this case would be to actually fund the construction of the units or whatever the development's going to be. Maybe it's going to be a hotel property, and maybe it's going to be multiple units, 500 units, like, because they always go to big banks in Wall Street to get money. And I just do think that the world it's going to open up. So when there are 50% of all jobs are going to be gone in the next 10 years that exist today. Realize that, right? And so how does money get distributed evenly or equally, or at least given so that some people can, so that a lot of people that typically wouldn't participate, they're going to be able to participate in things like NFTs in the smallest ways. You don't have to have Bitcoin in this case. You can have property, and you could be providing NFT tokens through property for these big developments, if that makes sense. And Vlad, I'm just curious what you think of this, because I really do think this is where it's going to start.
For sure, and I love that lead-in. I do want to be cautious that we're speaking to an audience that, and I'm doing everything I can not to go full crypto nerd on everybody.
I know.
But look, I think, but I like most folks my age, I go by the father-in-law test. Like, if my father-in-law's heard of it, I know it's real. So when he calls me and he's like, oh my gosh, Mark Cuban is on CNBC talking about that, whatever you've been telling me over Thanksgiving dinner for years. Now it's real. And so I had that moment with my father-in-law just the other night at his house. And because I bought some Bitcoin for him, I bought some Ethereum for him. It's sitting on a hardware wallet. And he's like upset with me because he's happy that it's made so many X's and so many multiples. But he's like, are you aware that I'd be making 8% on this crypto with in something called DeFi? And I'm like yes. And he's like, well, why aren't we doing that right now? Like, why is it sitting on a hardware wallet in a vault somewhere? And my answer is like, because it's DeFi, it's like real, like it's the real crypto Wild West. But you know what? 8% on your holdings or more resonates with people all over the world, whether you're a crypto person or you're not. And I think, and so I agree with you in that sense that some of these things that are maybe today or in months past the Wild West of crypto are roaring into the mainstream. And so you're talking about funding, right? And which is a lending process. And tapping into a decentralized network of liquidity providers, of lending providers, is where it starts getting really, really interesting. And do I think there's a future there? Absolutely. I just think that you're seeing it already with things that we as crypto nerds do. We do things like participate in decentralized exchanges. So while everybody's heard of a centralized exchange, we all support the exchanges that we use by adding liquidity to them and creating an exchange environment, and we all get rewarded for participating in doing that. And again, I'm using jargon, I'm using language that a lot of people listening are like, what are you talking about? But I agree with you that lending in the real estate business, it's not what it was, right? And so if there's an alternative in which a globally distributed network of people that are interested in microfinancing real estate is there a future there? Well, it's already here. It's just, can we make it usable for the business? And that's really and I'll end on this note. That's the challenge for me at Blockparty. That's a challenge for Natalia probably. That's a challenge for all of us working in the blockchain space. We are working with software. We're working with technologies that are not consumer technologies. Blockchains are not quite yet consumer technologies, and we're trying to flex them and mold them and do all sorts of things to make them acceptable for the consumer. And it's not an easy contortionist act to pull off, but we're getting there. I mean, Natalia, you and I were joking maybe a year and a half ago that we dropped the word blockchain from our pitches because it started to be kind of a dirty word. And now it's a new day, and now these things are getting interesting again. And the companies that are going to be successful in making this technology usable to the consumer and the business person are going to be the ones that are going to change the world.
And Vlad, you were saying this, if you look now, look, just like the sale for the, what was the band the other night? I'm forgetting the name of it. The band.
People? Kings of Leon, sorry.
Yeah, Kings of Leon. Yeah. So these are the kinds of things that happen. There's moments that happen. If you're in Venezuela, I promise you, you know what Bitcoin is and you know how to get your hands on it. If you're in African countries, there are many in North Africa, you know how to get Bitcoin. Same with Argentina and any other countries that are bankrupt, which, if you keep printing, it's pretty obvious it's going to happen sooner or later to everyone, even the US. By force, people are learning how to do things. And by force to go, okay, well, I can go on Abra or BlockFi right now and I can earn 5% or 4.5% on Bitcoin and 10% on cash. But if I go on Uniswap or SushiSwap, I can do some pairings and I can get 7 or 8%. Now, once you get to Abra and BlockFi, you'll figure out how to get over to getting a MetaMask account and getting on SushiSwap and Uniswap and getting your, feet wet. You'll start to do it naturally. You're going to figure it out because you're going to want the money. You're going to want those extra dollars because you're going to watch people rehypothecate faster than you. And so what seems very difficult to grasp, the problem is we're you and I and Natalia and William, we're all having a hard time keeping up with the fact that people are catching up. That's what I'm having a hard time with. I'm surprised at how fast people are catching up right now out of requirement. And that's why I say you're going to see things happen a lot faster. And so when you're trying to figure out what part you want to play in this whole space, you better pick a lane and stick to it because it's going to happen fast. And I really think that already forget banks lending. It's going to go away. I mean, who's going to want to use a bank when you could just go out to like a whole crew of worldwide people that have a little bit of faith in you and they see what you got? You're going to go that route versus going the route with some big bank that's going to be up your rear end. And you're not like dealing with like, okay, quarterly earnings. Like, okay, we got to report our earnings here, some publicly traded REIT, and there's so much pressure.
So Rick, what do you think's holding back? So I'm very familiar. I have a lot of friends and had some background in the development in the lending space. And especially, these projects like you were talking about, I'm from New York. So developer, they acquire the land, they need to get a loan for the acquisition and the pre-development. Then they have to go out and get a construction loan. And then they have to go out and get a long-term loan once the asset's stabilized. And I made it sound simple, but as you know, that's a long, arduous process.
And expensive.
Very expensive.
Crazy expensive. You're hiring banks to go out there and do the raise and finding like audiences that'll take your meeting. And, you got all these analysts, from Goldman Sachs and others. And it's like, you know what? It's just, you put out, if people have blind faith in these tokens, they're going to have blind faith in these developers. And you'll know who the good ones are. Some people are going to get burned. It's called life. If you just do a little research up front to see if the people that are behind this development are actually behind it, and they're not just advisors or something, and they've got a whole list of that, and they've got 2 or 3 people you never heard of with all the shit coins. Sorry, Natalia, I had to say that. But the point is, if there's been so much faith in that, you're going to see a more of a traditional approach to investing. And it might be like, okay, I'm going to take my portfolio, and believe me, the RIAs are going to do this for you, because the RIAs are going to be involved in crypto soon enough. And they're going to say, well, let's just get like a little bit of a higher return over here. I get 7 or 8% here. And this real estate development, we'll do a small basket here or allotment here. It'll fit into my, growth basket or something like that. That's what you're going to see. You're going to see this big shift. And even the Wall Street banks that do survive, which I hope none of them do, they're going to be involved. And initially, they're going to have the largest control of the wealthy. But the days are numbered where you go in and raise $300, $400, $500 million to build a high rise. They're numbered, and it's going to happen right through Proppy if I'm involved. And I really do think you can launch everything. Proppy should be the launching platform for so many of these things, and let people build their ideas off of property. Here's the platform. Here's the title process. We'll just shape it for whatever your needs are. But at the end of the day, just let it go where it goes. And I see that happening.
Yeah, wouldn't it be amazing? You own a property as an NFT, and then you use it as a collateral and you get money from the crypto community like within hours. No, those huge approval processes.
That's the point. Yeah. You're not going to do it.
Yeah,
and I think algorithms are going to run. I mean, my dream is that anybody who holds Bitcoin is a banker. It's like it's a banker. And I use algorithms to decide whether or not I want to participate in this investment or that one. Right now, you go on to Uniswap and SushiSwap, and you look at the pairings, and you decide if you're going to do this or that. It's not a lot different, but it'll get a lot more user friendly.
Yeah.
I just decide I've got a portfolio of Bitcoin. I got 100 Bitcoin, and I'm going to choose to put 3 Bitcoin in this deal and 2 over in this one here. And you're just, and you can continuously rebalance them. And I just see that happening, but you're going to need, like Vlad saying, it's going to be a little complicated. You're going to need, title. You're going to need to be, know how to like track everything through all the channels that are required. And the SEC will certainly be involved to some extent for some period of time. And hopefully Gensler comes in and fixes a lot of things, and the fear goes away. The fear needs to come down, but the pressure is coming from both sides right now. This is what I see.
Totally. And I think the start of the crypto movement, which started 10 years ago, it started with really nerds and engineers. Then we've got this second spike last year when CEOs thought that it's a fiduciary duty now to actually put some money of the company to Bitcoin. And then we're seeing now artists, musicians, creative communities to come on board because of NFTs. And I'm sure many of them actually were not into Bitcoin. They're fresh comers in the space. And the next wave could be the real estate community, just like it happened with Clubhouse. On Clubhouse, first they were VCs, entrepreneurs for almost 1 year till suddenly real estate community realized there is value there. And within weeks, thousands, hundreds of thousands of agents, I think, got into Clubhouse, joined it, and they live there. So I think like it's a huge opportunity for the real estate community now to get involved. And now it's easier, it's user-friendly. And to wrap up our conversation, what would be the advice from you, Rick, and from you, Vlad, and Willie, to get started with NFT and maybe those who are not in Bitcoin yet?
Well, I suppose why not? I'll jump in first. You make, and I'll start on something you said, Natalia, is a lot of the musicians and artists are not crypto people, but they're business people, whether they realize it or not. And, consumer behaviors and business behaviors impact how we behave as people. Profound statement, right? Look, they musicians, for example, are the business of selling records, and going platinum with how many records you've sold, got replaced by streaming, and so the amount that musicians were getting paid to sell recorded versions of their music dropped drastically. And it's no surprise then that the last 10 years since streaming became a thing, the quality of concerts and music festivals and live events went tremendously through the roof because everybody had to get on the road and tour to make the money they were used to making. Prior to that, when the main part of the business model was selling records, you had performers that weren't really great stage performers, like, using like vocoders to just create better recorded music to sell discs. And now we're having this thing where musicians that don't make a lot of money on streaming are like, oh, wait, I can redefine the way I create ownership around my music, around my content. And so it's changing. It's not about learning. It's not about suddenly believing in Bitcoin, although once they start learning about it, they start believing in it. And so what I would say to real estate is, yes, bet on your industry being the next one to get excited about this. Get ready for it by getting familiar with some of the concepts that we're talking about on this call. The easiest thing, buy a little bit of Bitcoin if you don't know anything at all about it, or an Ethereum. But
a little bit meaning $100.
Yeah, like $5, like $100.
Not like several Bitcoins, right?
Yeah, no, just buy enough to be dangerous, right? And then get it off Coinbase. Learn how to, take your Ethereum off Coinbase and just start touching some of the apps like MetaMask. And then I would also say some of the things that Rick mentioned are like Uniswap and SushiSwap. We're getting into like the advanced things, but they're really easy to learn because the interfaces are getting easier and they're getting more comfortable. And you have stuff like BlockFi and Celsius out there that make it easier. Just kind of like get acquainted with it. Go listen to people on Clubhouse and start learning some of the tools because, because you don't want to get caught flat-footed. And that's, you got to stay nimble to these things. And that's really my best advice, to start the education process now, because what used to be a really long time to figure all this stuff out has been drastically shortened.
Thank you, Vlad. And Rick, you have a number of crypto people as your customers. Does it help you to talk the same language with them when it comes to networking and then turning them into your customer as a real estate buyer or seller?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's pretty obvious to most people that I have a real serious love affair with this alternative money, and that that I really feel like the shift has already happened, and it's just like you got to get your hands on some Bitcoin and Ethereum, whether it's fractional amounts of it. Yes, I have clients who own a lot of Bitcoin and Ethereum. I don't yet see anybody transacting in it, but that is going to change soon, really, really soon. And it isn't because they wouldn't, but if you sell Bitcoin or Ethereum, you are going to pay long or short-term capital gains. So just think about it, like if you bought a house and you flipped it and you sold it within the first year, you're going to pay short-term capital gains, or what's called ordinary income, which is brutal, especially in the state of California. And so people will borrow against their Bitcoin holdings, and that lending facilitation is about to happen on a mass scale. So you'll pay 2 or 3 or 4 points to borrow cash against your Bitcoin. You might pay a little bit more, depends on where you're borrowing, but typically you'll have to stake or put up. If you have $1 million in Bitcoin, you probably borrow $500,000 against it. You'll probably have to pay 3 or 4 points. Depends on where the money's coming from. Who knows? But it's a lot better. It unlocks the liquidity of that Bitcoin, and people are going to do that initially just to put down payments on houses. See, this is a very big deal because holders of Bitcoin and even Ethereum and other tokens, they are not going to sell their tokens. They believe, like me, that Bitcoin is going to go to 100 grand and $1 million, and God knows from there.
Unless they see a piece of art that can go up in value as well.
And this is what they'll do, but they will borrow money against their crypto assets to buy those. See, there's going to be like this reapplication. You're going to start to see, if you could watch the Bitcoin wheel spin You're going to see people borrowing against it to buy an NFT because they think that NFT is going to go up in value. And they think they're getting they're going to be trading it like, oh, this piece of digital art is going to be more valuable in time than the value of Bitcoin going up. And they'll be making hedges. They're basically betting that that's going to go up in value more, right? And then there's probably going to be prediction markets betting on that, whether that happens, right? Yeah. People will be on Poly Market, or they'll be on Augur, or they'll be on other, platforms betting on whether or not that NFT actually goes up. I mean, on that digital art, I see this is going to create look at Vegas. It used to be like, who wins the game? Now it's like, who's kicked the first field goal? Who caught the first pass? I mean, so when you look at the way things go and all the different ways you can bet, you'll start to see people betting on whether or not Bitcoin or Ethereum goes up faster than other plays that they're making. And they're going to be betting on things like art and other NFTs that actually get listed and placed and auctioned off. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Thank you, Rick. Willie, when you were researching NFTs, have you actually tried to go in some of the platforms and look what they offer?
I have not. I have just been trying to research NFTs, all the different applications, and then, I'm interested with the music application, the art application, and obviously most relevant to myself and Proppy is the real estate application. So, yeah, still trying to wrap my head around it, but I just think that, anytime there's inefficiency, and then going back to the lending example, which is an incredibly inefficient process, technology creates more efficiency. So that, to me, from our application, I feel like that's where I have the best understanding for it. And then as I learn more about the other applications, trying to see how it's creating efficiency there, but it's certainly a future for it.
Awesome. Thank you. So Rick, Vlad, what are the platforms where we can recommend to look at some NFTs on sale? And meanwhile, I am posting several links with examples of NFTs that were auctioned recently, and one YouTube video on how to create an NFT for a digital art. Vlad, do you want to go first?
Yeah, well, I'm a company man at heart, so please visit blockparty.co to learn more. But look, I spend a lot of my time with Blockparty at the intersection of music and art. And so, Natalia, you shared the Forbes article about Blau selling an NFT as an album. Blau's an old friend, and we did Blau's first NFT at Blockparty, and it was a really interesting experiment on how a fan can own an exclusive piece of music, an exclusive piece of artwork. And these are things I talk about, music and art. But I think that largely I talk about those things because we are talking about a consumer application of an NFT, and music and art and sports are things that we as people love. And so we tend to gravitate to them before we, need to understand what a non-fungible token is. Underneath the hood of Blockparty is our NFT protocol, which is led by our CTO, Joseph Fischella, who also, created Florin Coin and has spent time at Mike Novogratz's Galaxy and has accomplished a tremendous amount in the crypto world. And so now he's leading our NFT protocol. That's at nft.org. nft.org, an NFT protocol is not just for the music, sports, and art that we talk about on our Blockparty front end. It is a launch pad for a lot of the things that Rick is talking about. When it comes to creating, partitioning it off in NFT and, getting lending against that NFT, when it comes to doing all sorts of things that you can do in the future of NFTs, we're building that with our NFT protocol. So, and that can also act as a great resource to learn more about what NFTs can be. So again, company man, nft.org.
nft.org. nft.org. We're posting this in the chat on Zoom. For the folks that are watching us on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn and Twitter, we'll be doing a blog post with all these resources so that you can access them. Also, subscribe to our weekly webinars so that you get access to our Zoom calls and ask questions directly to our panelists. Once again, thank you so much for this tremendous value you are bringing, folks. That was a wonderful discussion. We had to learn and discover a lot together, especially for the space of the intersection of real estate and NFTs. Please join us on Friday on Clubhouse. We'll have another discussion on the same topic with fabulous speakers, and you'll be able to participate. Thank you so much for joining us today.